what happened to Stephanie when she was 4 years old. So that led her to deal with conflicts, either being the invisible girl, surprise here, I'm not the invisible girl, Stephanie is, or being very visible to her conflict partners, visible and audible. And I will answer that question to you in the next 12 minutes. I'm Franziska Brandt-Biesler. Some of you know me, others don't. I'm a coach and sales expert, coach for more than 10 years, sales expert for more than 20 years, and I'm working with logosynthesis since 2014. I'm almost a master practitioner, but not yet. I have to do two small things, but then I will be a master practitioner. Um, at the moment, I'm a practitioner and instructor of logosynthesis. And Stephanie is a dentist, a client of mine. She is specialized on children and she has a very successful dentist office in a big city in Germany. She's well known for her job, and she came to me with two issues, that was anger and stress. And we will concentrate on the anger here in this session and what happened, how this all developed. Just a short question. I know some of you, and I know some of the colleagues are very experienced that are here. How about the others? Who is working with logosynthesis themselves? Can you give me a hands up so I know where we are starting? Okay. Yes, Magdalena, I thought so. Okay, so, but then allow me, because we have at least one person that doesn't have the experience with logosynthesis, that I go into the theory a bit as well. But the main point is the story of Stephanie. So she came to me and she wanted to talk about the anger she always felt, and the she told me she would flip out, she would explode, she would not be able to address things properly when she got so angry. How do we work with an issue like this in logosynthesis? I think the most important thing is building up a working relationship, but then it's as well important to explore. And we have seen two very nice examples with Astrid and Heather working on this. They took quite some time to explore. And then when you do this, you don't need as many sentences. I remember when I started, I did logosynthesis sentences all the time, and everything was worth a logosynthesis sentence. And yeah, that changed over time with my experience. So the exploring part was very important also in this setting with Stephanie. So, as I said, she described herself as exploding, getting crazy. She had so many different ways of saying that she would just go mad about things. And here is one difficult thing. I cannot go to work with this anger, because as we understand it, anger is a second what's it called? Second order dissociation, meaning she chooses to be angry, not consciously, but unconsciously. She chooses to be angry rather than feel the real emotion that lies underneath, and that's much more hurtful. So we had to explore which emotion and which triggers lie underneath this anger. And in her case, it was fear, panic to make mistakes. She really wanted or needed, in her opinion, to be perfect in order to be loved by people, in order to be accepted by people. We don't work with these emotions that I discovered there. We would work with triggers, with situation, with people, with beliefs, as we saw before. But the emotions are valuable very valuable information. And they, for example, they tell me if the situation is activated. As you saw before in the two demonstrations, the both ladies experienced the stress. And so I need these emotions to see if my client experiences this emotion. And we needed a couple of sessions to get to know each other and we in the beginning I work on more superficial experiences with the client. Superficial maybe is not the right word, but we don't go too deep in the beginning. So it took us 3 sessions until we discovered the mother, or not discovered, but Stephanie told me about her mother. And her mother would get really, really, really angry, crazy, exploding, and so on. Do you hear the words that Stephanie used to describe herself? And that's what she experienced exactly with her mother. Then we looked into what happened to Stephanie at that time, which images came up. And she told me she saw herself sitting on the stairs to the basement, being really quiet, doing nothing in order to wait for her mother to calm down. Or she would sit in her room doing nothing in order to not make her mother angry. That was the first indicator to patterns that were still alive in Stephanie's adult life. She still made herself unseen, invisible, even in her job. She would prefer to go to her own room in lunch breaks um, and not mingle with her employees, with her staff. She would rarely talk to them. For example, if her assistant dentist would come in the evening and wanted to address something, she very often tried to postpone this conversation and not have it because she really didn't want to talk to her, resulting in her employees not knowing what she really wanted, what were her expectations. The other thing about her was perfectionism, because this was the second solution that Stephanie found to the problem with the mother when she was small. And her perfectionism would go as far as sh her calling herself a control freak. She really wanted to control everything in her dentist office. And you see the problem here. People don't know her expectations. She is a perfectionist and wants to control everything, but doesn't tell the people what they should achieve. And then she always waited until she got really angry to address things. And then, of course, she would explode, imitating her mother's behavior. We worked on this layer by layer by layer. And then at some point we came uh, to an issue I couldn't address with the normal basic procedure of logosynthesis, but I really wanted to do a mapping with her to see when it all started. Mappings are kinds of constellations. We have a lot of different ways to work with these constellations. Very helpful because you not only have your brain and your unconscious mind, but you have your body as well. And although it's online, I love to work in the room. Not only you can do it with little pieces of paper on the table, but for me it's way more powerful to let the person experience it. And we did a timeline, and I asked her to start from the here and now and then go back to the point where everything was still okay. She still felt happy. Sometimes you have to go way back, before birth, even before conception. In this case, that was not necessary. It was enough to go back until she was 4 years old. And she went to the point where she really felt free, a child, she could play, she would feel happy in her family. And then something happened, and I let her walk one step ahead. And she could never have thought that. But in this moment, she experienced, and the image came up of her bigger sister going to school, because that is what happened when she was 4 years old. The bigger sister started school, wasn't there anymore for her. Until that moment, the bigger sister was her protection, her buffer, to protect her from the mother. And now little Stephanie was on her own. The sister not only went to school in the morning, but she had new friends. And of course, these friends were way more interesting than a little 4-year-old sister. So she had to discover all these coping mechanisms to this situation, and her coping mechanisms were being invisible or perfect. And then when she had to go into conflicts, she could only do it the way she learned by her mother. After we worked on this situation, on this point of her life, and then she went through the timeline further on, and there were 1 or 2 more points where we had to work. But then, for the first time in her life, she could see the situation from an adult perspective. And she could understand that she is doing the setting the ground rules for her practice, but she also has to communicate them. For the first time in her self-employed life, or in her life as a businesswoman, she sat down and made a list of what she wanted and how she wanted it to be. And then as a result, she was able to address her expectations to her staff. And for her, that was a big revelation. And for me as well, it was great to see that. That was the story of Stephanie. Now we have a couple of moments time for questions and remarks. And yeah, please open your mics.
How many sessions did it take to bring her to this result?
I think the timeline we did in the 5th or 6th session we had, and my sessions are normally about 90 minutes. Not as short as Willem wants me to work, but that's the time I take.
And just another question following. In general, when do you start using logosynthesis during your sessions?
It depends.
Is it in your first session, or it depends on the working alliance?
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the contract we have. In this case, she came and she had read about logosynthesis, and she came especially to work with logosynthesis. And in this case, I started in the first session, but working on some situation of the here and of her present life, nothing too complicated, just for her to experience it from the beginning. But it depends. I have other contracts that are, for example, in a completely different direction about sales. As I told you, I'm a sales expert, and then I sometimes don't use it at all, or it really takes time until I start with it. But if it's really about coaching, about working on themselves, I usually start very fast to use logosynthesis because it's so strong, and why not?
Thank you.
Welcome. What
Do
else?
people always have memories?
Maybe not memories. Sometimes metaphors come up. Sometimes only, I don't know, a sentence, a belief comes up. It's different, but we have so many things we can work with. It doesn't necessarily have to be a memory. I have the impression the better the work alliance is, the better the chance that memories are allowed to come up in our work alliance. I don't know, how do you see that, the experienced ones, Chanda and Daniela?
Absolutely. I think it's a place of comfort and security, which comes with the trust from the working alliance.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes, as in this example, you really need the body to find the memories, because if it's only talking, I have clients that can explain everything, but then they won't come into their emotions, they won't come into their body, and they won't get the memories, the images from the past. And that's why I love to work with mappings, with the body, with body sensations a lot. They help a lot.
Why did you choose to work with the client 90 minutes? Because
I don't.
I do the.
Yeah. Continue, please.
Oh, I can't hear. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please complete your question.
Okay, because I do the practitioner in Logosynthesis, and I do not work actually as a coach. I'm working as a designer and will do it in the future. And my feeling is that I'm also more comfortable with 90 minutes. And you are the first I hear it that you do that. So it's
Yeah.
good to hear it.
Yeah, that's the same.
Sorry for my bad.
It developed that way. Of course, if you hear Willem, 1 hour is more than enough. And sometimes I am through in 1 hour, but very often we have a little chat to start with, then we go into the topic, then we start to work. And yeah, maybe I'm a bit slow, that's possible, but it turned out that 90 minutes is fine. If we are faster, good. But then if I do a mapping, I sometimes need even longer.
Well, thank you very much. This was a fascinating case study. I really learned a lot. And I was wondering how it is that you're able to do timeline and mapping remotely.
I asked the participant to put their laptop in some space where I can see a bit more of the room. And then they can move in the room, and sometimes there's not much space, then it's a smaller mapping, and sometimes the situation is great and I can see a lot. In her case, she had a lot of space in her room where she could walk, and she put the laptop on a little table, and then I could see her. I think she had 3 meters to move. And that's good, that's fine. But I worked in restricted rooms as well, and sometimes it's only a chair. Just take a second chair and go to the other chair, and then move back. There's always opportunities to do this, and I prefer to work with markers on a table. It works as well, but it's not as powerful in my experience.
Right, right. Well, I guess, what I'm thinking, let's say if you've got a long, narrow room, for example, and you've got the laptop at one end because it's got to be plugged in. And then they're walking away from you to the extreme other end of this long, narrow room. Do you have a problem hearing them as they get further away?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I mean, it can happen, but I just try, and up till now it worked fine when I chose to do it. So why not? And if it doesn't work, we'll see, and then I can still switch to working on the table with markers.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice work. Thank you, Franziska.
Thank you, Heike. Anything you want to know?
Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I have
Ken.
a question.
Yeah.
So I recognize it's just a matter of evolving as a practitioner, but is there some guidance you can give when you talked about, I'm sorry, my camera's kind of funny. If you talked about how you work on the alliance and then you transition personally to, use logosynthesis and everything you heard to, really exploring and using the sentence maybe later in the process. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you had that personal evolution?
Yeah, it was all the experiences I made and all the experiences I saw in the many, many seminars I participated in that showed me that many, for example, situations you see are not worth using the sentences because it's not the real thing. I saw more and more that the things that really change a person happen way earlier in life. So doesn't make much sense to work on the situation with the colleague that happened yesterday. It can be a good point to start with a new client so they can experience logosynthesis in a situation that is not too hard for them. But then when the working alliance is there, I don't bother with what happened yesterday. I try to find the trigger that happened when she was little, and usually that's somewhere in between 0 and 6, or even before that. And then when the working alliance grows, you can get deeper and earlier with the client. That's I think that's a process you yourself have to make as well. And I think it's not a bad thing to do more sentences in the beginning. That's just the way how you learn it. But then, as you see, Willem, of course, I don't want to compare myself with Willem, but in the beginning, when I saw him working and he did one set of sentences and issue was solved, I thought I would never get there. And of course, he always tells me, "How old are you? So you have 16 more years to become as good as I am." And I think that's true. The gap is 16 years, but still I became better and I use less sentences. And of course, he's a big role model in that.
I want to thank you as well, Franziska, and to add to the remarks you made, I think it is also that your own trust is growing in working with logosynthesis.
Yes.
That your confidence that the process will work increases as you work with more clients.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. And one more suggestion: work with colleagues as much as you can. Have 1, 2, or 3 practice groups. I learned so much in the practice groups as well, because you not only have opportunities to work on issues, but you have the reflection afterwards. That's one of the most valuable things I experience in this community here. Being in a practice group with Heike, for example, for years now.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to all of you. It was really fun.